your host, Joel Perez, and you're watching Wrestling with Politics. And today we're going to be discussing a surprising loss for the progressive movement that recently happened in the Wisconsin's governor's race for Francesca Hong, who seems to be poised to easily become the next governor of Wisconsin. According to the polls, she was up over 20 points, and it was looking like she was easily going to run away with it. But of course, as we all know, the polls ended up being wrong, and that proves right there that the polls are complete garbage. Francesca Hong, she ended up losing by only half a point to David Crowley, who was the Zionist Democratic establishment backed candidate. So clearly, we didn't want him to win. But the polls, that's a big story coming out of this. They were completely wrong. But we already knew that the polls are useless in a lot of these situations, and they've been wrong a lot in the past. To me, what's the big story here, and this is why I had to make this video, because there's a lot of implications here about what this means for the progressive movement and the future of progressive politics. Because to me, the reason that Francesca Hong lost is becoming more and more clear is not because of some controversial statements, which that's what a lot of people are claiming. Her controversial past statements about Thanksgiving and saying that Thanksgiving should be canceled. A lot of people are saying that she lost because of that and that she was unelectable, and that's the mainstream media narrative when it comes to her. And there's a lot of other reasons, people saying she didn't have enough money, but to me, it's quite impressive. She came within half a point of winning here. She almost ran away with the whole thing, despite the fact that she didn't have as much money, despite the fact that she did have that controversial past, and despite the fact, and this is the big reason why I think she lost, despite the fact that she didn't have the endorsement of the leaders of the progressive movement, AOC and Bernie Sanders. And of course, AOC and Bernie Sanders, they've been making a lot of endorsements recently. We just made a video about Abdul El Said. He won his primary by 2 points, thanks to the endorsement, you can probably say, of AOC and Bernie Sanders. There was also a big victory in Minnesota for a candidate named Penny Flanagan, who was running for Senate. She ran away with this. She won by over 20 points, and she was also endorsed by Bernie and AOC. So clearly, their endorsement, it means something, and you would expect it. I've covered it before on this channel. They have millions of voters, AOC and Bernie Sanders. They have a lot of sway in the Democratic Party, and if they're willing to mobilize their voters and use their popularity and their social media presence for good, they can do a lot with that. But that's my criticism of AOC and Bernie Sanders. Many times they choose not to do a lot with that. And that's exactly what they did here in the race for Francesca Hong. And that's why I'm going to make the argument in this video that they screwed over Francesca Hong, because she only lost by half a point. I think it's very easy to say that an endorsement from AOC and Bernie, it would have easily put her over the edge. I think that's not that controversial of a statement to make, but they chose not to. And this is somebody who is a DSA-backed candidate in Wisconsin. This is somebody who claims to be a democratic socialist in Francesca Hung, and that's exactly what AOC and Bernie Sanders claim to be, democratic socialists. And she supports Medicare for all and universal public education and all the good stuff. So why did they have such a big problem? Why was it so difficult for them to come and help out this candidate in Wisconsin and give her the support that she needed to put her over the edge? Well, that's what we're going to discuss in this video. But first, let's roll this clip about Bernie Sanders, where he's asked how exactly he calculates these endorsements and why he chose to do what he did in Wisconsin. Roll the tape.
How do you calculate, where are you going to place endorsements and where not? I mean, we just had Francesca Hong lose by a hair in Wisconsin, and impossible to know, exactly whether an endorsement from you or AOC would make a difference. But how do you and I keep using the example of that game Risk, which I played as a kid, where, you don't move to Kamchatka until you have enough on Irkutsk or something. How do you calibrate that?
That's a good question. And it's, something that we in our political movement think about a whole lot. I think for a start, we don't want to overextend ourselves and promise more than we can provide. So we take, and second of all, I am a United States Senator. Am I familiar with the agricultural problems facing farmers in Wisconsin? I am not. Do I know something about what's going on nationally? I do. So for a start, most of our focus, with a few exceptions, has been on U.S. Senate races, Maine, Michigan, Minnesota, maybe elsewhere, and congressional races, a lot of congressional races. Also, we have supported dozens and dozens of what we call down ballot candidates, people running literally for school board, city council, mayor, state legislature. Why are we doing that? In that it's to create, in a sense, a farm team. These are the young people who 10, 20 years from now will be national leaders. And we want to help them get elected, get the experience that they need. And then furthermore, when we look at a campaign, for example, you got wonderful victories that took place in mayor's races in Seattle, Washington, D.C. We were not involved in those races. So we can't do everything. But what we do, we want to do well and give the kind of support to those candidates that they may need. That's kind of the answer. Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense to me.
And there's a whole lot to tackle after watching that clip of Bernie Sanders right there. Because Bernie Sanders, he basically said a whole lot of nothing. He said that, oh, we don't want to overextend ourselves. And so what the hell does that even mean? How do you overextend yourself by offering a candidate an endorsement? That's just something, what, you posted on Twitter and you say, we endorse this candidate. How is that overextending yourself? That made no type of sense. And then he says that we want to form a team of young progressive leaders, new upcoming stars. That's what we're aiming for with these endorsements. And so why wasn't Francesca Hahn good enough to be on that team? Why didn't she make the cut? And then I just want to mention here Sam Cedar as well, who let Bernie Sanders give that absolutely pathetic, basically politician non-answer. And then he just says, that sounds good to me. And that's complete garbage right there as well. Sam Cedar, you're a complete tool. And that goes to show why Bernie Sanders is comfortable going on Sam Cedar's show, because he knows that he can just completely flub the question, completely give a non-answer, not answer the question, and he can just get away with it after giving an answer like that they didn't truly answer the question of why Bernie Sanders decides to endorse certain candidates and not endorse others. You need to ask the question again. You need to press him and ask further. Wait a minute. You didn't answer the question there. Why didn't you endorse Francesca Hahn? And there's a reason why Bernie Sanders didn't support Francesca Hahn, and he didn't answer the question there, so I can't definitively tell you this is the reason, but I'm going to speculate here, and my speculation, I think it's based pretty well, because the reason that Bernie Sanders didn't support Francesca Hahn, they've been talking about it in the media, that Francesca Hahn is this unelectable candidate and she has all this baggage. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, her comments on Thanksgiving and that we should cancel Thanksgiving and her former tweets, apparently she has some weird past tweets and she has bad optics. So that's why Bernie Sanders and AOC didn't endorse her, because, oh, she has bad optics and we don't want to risk anybody else, any of these other candidates that we've endorsed, getting bad publicity off of her. We don't want to risk ourselves, Bernie Sanders and AOC, getting bad publicity off of her past and her past tweets. We don't want to jack that. And it's completely pathetic, if you ask me, for them to take that stance. They're not publicly saying that, but I'm pretty sure that's the reason why they didn't want to endorse Francesca Hahn, because otherwise, why not? She believes all of the same things that you believe. And she's a fighter, at least she claims to be, for working class people. And so if Bernie Sanders and AOC actually believe in fighting for working class people, if Bernie Sanders and AOC actually believe in democratic socialism, then you should be able to put her past aside. And number two, you should have some political courage and be willing to endorse her and back her despite her past. Because think about it, AOC and Bernie Sanders, what are they doing doing right now? A lot of these progressive leaders, Mamdani included, what are they doing right now? They're saying that woke one is crazy, and they're trying to distance themselves from crazy comments that they've made in the past themselves. So why can't Francesca Hong distance herself from her past? Why is she being attached to her past and nobody's willing to attach themselves to her because of that? Well, it's because these politicians are cowards and they don't want to fight any battles, and that's why they're doing this of distancing themselves from their past, because instead of being willing to explain yourself and say, here's what I was saying when I was saying woke one. Another example, defund the police. They're backing away from defund the police, and Francesca Hong's another one. She also backed away from defund the police, which, okay, whether or not you disagree or agree with defund the police, that's one thing, but at least have the balls, at least have the courage to make the argument and fight for what you actually believe in. If you believe in defund the police, make the argument. Tell us why we should defund the police. Do the work of actually fighting for the cause that you believe in. But none of these politicians have the balls to do so. They're all afraid about the optics. They're all afraid about, oh, the media's gonna talk crap about me. They're all afraid that they might lose a couple voters, and they're not willing to fight the the battle that's actually required in order to get anything done, because they're all cowards. And that's exactly the calculation that Bernie Sanders and AOC were making here. If you're actually an ardent defender of the working class, you should be able to put her past aside and realize what's most important here. What's more important? The Francesca Hong winning, getting another victory for a DSA-backed candidate, a Democratic socialist, somebody who supports Medicare for all, getting that person as the leader of Wisconsin, or caring about her bad optics. And now we're stuck with David Crowley, who's somebody who is an ardent Zionist, who's backed by the worst people, the Democratic establishment, by corporations, by billionaires, and somebody who, on the specific issue of data centers, is completely polar opposite. AI data centers, which are driving up the electricity in a lot of these places, which are leaving places in America with dirty water. This is a very important issue, which are stealing our information and surveilling Americans. AI data centers are the complete one of the most horrible things that are happening right now. And Francesca Hong, that was one of her main issues, to put a moratorium on those AI data centers. And when asked David Crowley, her opponent, which issue he disagrees with Francesca Hong the most about, he said it was those AI data centers. So we already know this guy, he's going to completely give Wisconsin away to exactly that, these AI data centers, to large corporations, and he's going to let these people run amok and do whatever they want. So on important issues like that, you had a clearly defined progressive candidate, and then you have a Democratic establishment Zionist in David Crowley, and AOC and Bernie Sanders. They didn't care to actually help out Francesca Hong and further their movement, which is something that I don't agree with these Democratic Socialists about everything. I have my big disagreements with AOC and Bernie Sanders, but AOC and Bernie Sanders are the exact people who will tell you to not let the enemy be the perfect of the good. They're the same people who will tell you that we need to work with these people. And I personally I'm willing to work with anybody to do good and nobody to do bad. So why in this situation were AOC and Bernie Sanders not willing to do the same? Why weren't they willing to work and help out Francesca Hong, who it wouldn't be that hard for them to do so, in order to advance the Democratic Socialist agenda? Well, Bernie Sanders didn't answer the question, so there's no certain way to know. But I personally can tell you it's because Bernie Sanders and AOC have no political courage. They don't actually they're not the best leaders for this democratic socialist movement. If you actually believe in democratic socialism, if you actually believe in policies like Medicare for all, which I support, and policies like universal public education and things like that, these people aren't going to get you there. If you follow AOC and Bernie Sanders on this path, it's a road to a graveyard because AOC and Bernie Sanders are two closeted supporters of the corporate establishment Democratic Party. That's the agenda that they're actually trying to advance. They're trying to sheep herd voters back into a corporate warmongering genocidal party. I'll say it at the top of my lungs as many times as I can until people get that point. And that's why they stab in the back and leave behind progressive candidates who you would expect them to support, like Francesca Hong, because they don't have the balls, they don't have the courage to actually fight for the policies and for the candidates who they actually believe in. They only support the safe candidates who they already know are going to win. So it's absolutely pathetic. They have no balls, they have no stones. And if these are the leaders of your movement is already dead. And that's quite the shame because it looks like the Democratic Socialists are picking up a lot of election victories. More of them are starting to win. The ones who are backed by AOC and Bernie Sanders, at least. So you do have an opportunity here to actually get more people who are against the Zionist lobby, who support Medicare for all, into Congress. You have an opportunity to make change, but you have the leaders of that very movement standing against change. We would have had somebody else, another ardent defender for the working class. At least she claims to be Francesca Hong. But they weren't willing to help her out. And now we have another Zionist. What a complete shame here. Bernie Sanders and AOC, they deserve to be called out for this. But for now, you guys can let me know what you guys think, and you can call them out in the comments section down below. Let me know what you think about this situation. Did Bernie Sanders and AOC, should they have intervened here and helped Francesca Hong out? Or do you think they should have just left her by the wayside like what they ended up doing? Well, for now, make your voices heard. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you all very, very soon. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you on next week.